Welcome to This Week in Perspective with me, Adam Simbe. The Comptroller and Auditor General recently tabled his 2015-2016 annual report to the current budget session of the National Assembly in Dodoma amid, heated discussion on his findings in the media and elsewhere where the report is taken very seriously. Today, we are privileged to have the Comptroller and Auditor General, Professor Musa Asad, to share with us his experiences, sometimes difficulties, if there are any, and challenges, which I think there are many, in auditing public sector accounts and finances. Professor Asad, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Adam. My pleasure.
Thank you. We are privileged to have you on this program. And by and large, and I'm sure everybody who is going to watch this program will really accept the fact that your position is very important. And what you do in terms of national auditing is very crucial, is very important. I would say fundamental. So welcome again to the program.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Maybe we should start with the very first question. Are the reports of the Comptroller and the Auditor General reports taken seriously by the government and the related institutions once you table them, once they are tabled in Parliament? And I understand you don't personally table them, they're tabled by the Minister or Minister of State for, is it local government?
The sector ministers.
The sector minister, okay.
So
let's start off.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think taken seriously, there are two answers. The simple answer is definitely yes. Governments take seriously my reports and by implication the Office of the National Audit Office as well. This has a time perspective. I think the first phase of government, I would say the National Audit Office was part and parcel of the executive.
That is the first phase, Mwalimu's
phase.
Yes.
And the weakness of that was there was no independence, institutional independence and financial independence of the office. The second phase, the same situation prevailed under Mzee Mwinyi. And my recollection is during the third phase when we had President Mkapa, that is when changes occurred. I think all phases of government, we must give credit that 1977 Constitution recognized the National Audit Office or the Office of the Auditor General as a constitutional creature.
Okay.
And that has always been nice. So that was done, and it also ensured the tenure of the office of the Comptroller Auditor General as well. The removal of that office is quite involving, and procedures are there to make sure that the tenure is difficult to play with.
It gave you clout, I suppose.
It does give you. I know some countries in Africa where every time there's a change in government, the Comptroller Auditor General is changed, and that cannot be good. So that is the extended reply to your question, that yes, the officers take very, very seriously the reports and the office as well. I think I must be very frank and give credit to the first phase government, which for 10 years, I wasn't there then, but for 10 years, it ensured resources to that office. And a lot of our expansion and recognition worldwide happened during that time. We had the largest number of staff recruited. We had, in my view, the largest resource base, I think up to about 76 billion a year. The last year of the presidency of President Kikwete. And actually there was a time people were coming from private sector to the National Audit Office, which doesn't happen elsewhere.
To come to work, to come to source information.
Yes. To come to work, which meant the office must have been attractive.
Yes.
But also during the fifth phase, what I notice is the same has continued. We are given the same recognition.
Yes.
We had small problems with financing last year, but I think all of us have learned from that, and I believe the next year is going to be much, much better than the previous year.
Oh, that's very interesting. If the answer to my first question is what you have expressed, and very ably so, then my follow-up question would be, obviously, it is an annual event for you to table the report, the audit report, to the Assembly. Are your findings, and most importantly, recommendations, implemented and taken, I mean, they're put into action, as it were? If not, would you say why not?
I think the answer to your question is, my reports, generally we follow up. Our recommendations, we follow them up every year. So whenever we do a current audit, we follow up on previous year's recommendations. We have a section known as implementation of previous year's recommendations.
Okay.
And that is a constant feature in all our reports. This year, what I notice is less implementation than the previous years.
When you say this year, Professor, can we clarify this for the
this year for
we mean for the reporting period?
For the reporting period, the
2015,
financial year
2016,
2015-16, financial year starting July 1st, 2015,
yes,
ending 30th June 2016.
Yes.
That is the financial year we audit in 2017.
Yes.
The level of implementation isn't very good. I think my recollection is 40% completely not implemented.
40%?
Not implemented completely, not even started. And I think the level of implementation, implemented ones, not even 20%.
Oh,
doesn't reach 20%.
Oh dear.
So the level of implementation is not very good. But do we follow up? Yes, we do. We do follow up because every year what we require from sector ministries is an action plan. How do they plan to implement our recommendations? And that becomes a contract between us and the sector ministries, and the permanent secretaries have an obligation to make sure that the action plan is put into is executed. And usually they do execute, especially recommendations that may not require substantial resources. I notice sometimes less implementation may be brought about because there are less resources available to implement.
Or delay in getting allocation.
Delays in getting allocation. I'll give you an example. Last year, we had a big problem with local government authorities because they could not separate buildings from land. And it is an accounting standard that requires that buildings are separated from land, and a lot of local authorities, nearly all, didn't do that. And we qualified financial statements. We say that is the only way we can do this. We're going to qualify your financial statements, and we recommend that next year you employ valuers and make sure that these two assets are separated. That required resources.
Yes.
But because it was important, local authorities made sure resources are there, and this year they've done that.
Okay. Okay.
So some recommendations get implemented, others not so.
For those 40% which you say they are not implemented, and for those implemented by 20% but not really fully implemented, would you mind to tell us, to tell the viewers why this is not so?
I think the reason is sometimes executives don't prioritize issues. They will think they're not important. Well, they're actually very, very important, and then they don't implement them. But then my duty is to remind them every month to send a letter to the permanent secretary that you have not implemented this. please could you tell me why you have not done so? And over time, if they get 3 reminders, that means it's very serious now. And the option which you haven't taken is reporting them to the appointing authority, which is what we're going to do this year.
Okay. In the act that provides or creates the National Audit Office, which is subsequent to your office, is there an enforceable provision there? I mean,
No.
do you have teeth to bite?
No,
when
that is very, very issue. That's a very important matter. I know elsewhere, like in Uganda, they do,
Yes.
but we don't. As I told you, my office is created by the Constitution. I think it's Article 143, subsection 1. That
Okay.
creates the
The
office.
1997.
1997 Constitution.
No,
But throughout
1977?
1977 Constitution as revised. But we don't have anything we can do to enforce, implement it. There are times really I wish I had that power, because you go to some ministries and they have calculated that they are not going to give you vouchers. They decided they're not going to give you vouchers.
To go through.
Yes, you say, why? Confidentiality. I say, no, I have a constitutional mandate to audit, so you can't prevent me from seeing the vouchers. And we have gone through these arguments. If I had the mandate to say, no, we'll deduct 25% of your salary until you bring me the vouchers,
Yes.
then the PS will have to bring me the vouchers, because then there's a personal pain.
Yes.
But as of now, we don't have that. But would I wish to have that?
Who would initiate?
Maybe no. I don't think I wish to have that, because then you become the judge and jury.
Yeah, the jury.
And that is not very safe.
Yeah, but suppose you come across resistance from the office you're doing audit, and then if you had that power, then you refer to the relevant authorities for action.
That is what I do now.
Okay.
If there are any intransigence by an officer, usually I report to the Chief Secretary and say, I haven't got that information from a certain person. Could you please resolve the matter? And often they will resolve that matter.
Okay. You were appointed to this position in, to be exact, December 2014,
2014, yes.
by the third phase administration.
Fourth phase.
What were your expectations, and did you foresee challenges? And then the follow-up question is, have these expectations and challenges been met and addressed?
I think I was an academic for 25, 26 years.
Yes.
And I had reached a point where I was satisfied. I didn't look to go anywhere else. I was going to retire at the University of
You thought
Dar es Salaam.
that was enough? You didn't want
And
to
that,
climb up
for me,
any
that was
further?
enough. If there was anything,
Yes.
it would have to be something important and not a political
Okay.
position. And as if God listened to my wishes, I got this position of the Controller Auditor General, which is essentially a very professional office,
Non-political.
non-political and very independent. And I was very, very happy. So what did I have as expectations? I was moving from a very free society. University is a very free society. You could sit and say anything to the Vice Chancellor and no consequences. You would say anything without any problems. And I was going into public service. And public service, as I heard it at that time, was you do what you're told.
And there are rules and regulations.
And rules and regulations. And for me, one of the expectations I had was to change the National Audit Office from a pure public sector organization into a professional service. And that expectation I set out to realize. And in a limited way, I have.
Okay.
But it is a much more professional organization now. When I entered that office, you didn't have a system where you could account for hours of your staff, which in my view is very unprofessional. How can you work as a professional and not account for the hours you use in the office? So we
as well as accountability, I suppose.
we implemented that, and now everybody every week fills a timesheet and they report what they've done in the whole week, which is excellent. But there are some problems as well. You know, public service is a place that recruits or attracts a lot of people who, as I told you, they just do what they're told, no initiative. They wouldn't go the extra mile.
Yes.
And what we do is we encourage people to say, no problem, you can take initiative. And if you disagree with me as a CAG, come tell me. I'm going to be receptive. And people hesitate because they fear the position. And I tell them, no, I'm free. I've been raised an academic for many, many years. If there's anything you disagree with me, come tell me. I have no problem with that. So that is the challenge I face, that people simply respect the position.
They kind of protect their turf.
Yeah, definitely.
They don't want to do anything that
That
may
will
cost
hurt.
their
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that is.
How about motivation, Professor?
Motivation, as I told you, during the first phase of the government, the National Audit Office had quite substantial resources.
Yes.
So I think people were properly motivated. If they do something, they get motivated in terms of finance.
Yes.
There was an allowance for virtually everything that you do.
Okay. And paid.
You get paid.
Without hesitation,
If
without
you
delay.
came, last time we worked over the weekend in the office was when we were preparing to submit our report to the president.
Yes.
And people came to work on Saturday, they came to work on Sunday. In the old days, they will be paid for that.
Yes.
But as I was there, I said, look, I don't have resources to pay you, but you came. But we'll see if we get resources, we'll come and pay you back sometime. So that is motivation. And I think I must give credit to a lot of people in the regions.
Okay.
Because I sit here and I get the visibility, the recognition, but the bulk of the work is done by foot soldiers. My foot soldiers are in the regions.
In fact, that was I wanted to come here immediately. Is your office centralized or decentralized? And how extensive?
My office is essentially centralized.
Okay.
So I'm the only CAG, I'm the only person who can sign financial statements. Anybody else who signs financial statements, they have to have my direct delegation.
Okay. Okay.
In some cases, I've delegated those powers to some people in the regions
Okay.
for some projects that are limited in the regions. But we're present in all regions in the whole of the country.
Okay.
So 25 regions. Every region
Has an audit
has an
office.
office of my position. So we are represented in the whole of this country. So in that sense, that is decentralization.
Yes, yes.
But they don't have powers.
Okay.
So you can't say that is really decentralized.
So you have given them on the right
They,
and taken away.
they do
from
the
left.
activities. The reports have come to me
Yes.
for quality assurance all the way.
Okay.
And then when we approve, they become my reports.
Is that an efficient way of carrying national audit work?
It is a constitutional requirement.
Okay.
Because if I sign the reports,
Yes.
I have to be comfortable. So that authority to sign cannot be delegated.
Okay. 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 So would you quickly have the total number of staff you have?
This year I have 1,061.
Okay.
About 230 are administrative and the rest are professional.
Professional staff.
Professional means these are professional audit staff.
Okay.
Not all of them are qualified as CPAs. We're about 300 CPAs
Within this
within
organization.
national audit, which is a large number.
Yeah. Do you have training programs, retraining programs?
We do have internal training programs. Many years ago, we used to have generous programs to train our staff. But because of the shortages we had last year, we cut down on those. So nowadays we don't train
Okay.
the CPA,
Okay.
but we do run in-house programs
Okay.
to train. We get people from outside to come and train us.
Mm.
We develop champions, and these champions will develop other people as well.
Mm.
So that is where we undertake training in the office.
Okay. Then probably another question is, in your 2015-2016 report, which I also found it very interesting, you have highlighted concerns on a number of important issues, fundamental areas, but here I just want to cite a few. The national debt, and you have advised the government to borrow less. Why, in your view, is the government borrowing too much? And is this an annual event, borrowing every budget year? The government borrows so much, and you have discovered this for a while?
No, I think I don't think the government is borrowing too much. I mean, the issue is the government is not repaying. If you don't repay, you recycle your old debt.
Yes.
But you have new needs.
Yes.
So the new needs have got to be met.
Yes.
But the old debt has got to be carried as well.
Okay.
So as a result, the total debt is increasing.
Yeah, but how can the government be borrowing and the borrower, the man, the institution, which I suppose they're all commercial banks, how can they continue lending money to the government when there's no repayment?
I think governments operate differently from private businesses.
Yes.
Chances that a government will go bankrupt is virtually nil.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the risk of the government not paying is very, very small. So as a result, governments have larger leeways in borrowing than private people. And that is the reason why the government can borrow as much as they want.
So what would be your advice here? Seriously, I mean fundamentally.
My advice, and it is in the report, is we notice a significant increase in local borrowing.
Okay.
We also notice a large increase in what we call non-concessional external borrowing.
Okay.
Non-concessional means the maturities are shorter
Yes.
and the interest rates are higher.
Okay.
Usually government borrowing is concessionary. You go to large institutions like the IMF, the World Bank,
Yes.
they have windows for government to borrow under very attractive terms.
Okay.
When we go for these other borrowers, their
Yes.
terms are much tougher, shorter duration, and more expensive. So my advice would be for the government to ensure that they borrow much less locally, and if they have to borrow, then they borrow under concessionary terms
Okay.
and not non-concessionary terms. But that is easier said than done, because if we exhausted your concessionary terms,
Yes.
there is no other option except to go for non-concessionary terms.
Yes.
And if you cannot meet your budget, you have no other option except to go to the banks and borrow locally.
Yes.
But my advice is for local borrowing is, if you can introduce competition, it's going to be much, much better. What we notice is there are circumstances where the ministry will go to a single bank and borrow from that bank. So you get charged interest rate, and you get charged transaction costs. But if you open up 3-4 banks and they competed, you may be charged interest, lower rate, and no transaction cost.
Yes. Because of competition.
Because of competition. So we noticed that in one instance the government borrowed from a single bank, and that is what we call deadlocked procurement. Somebody had decided, I'm going to this bank and borrow from that bank. And that is always not good.
Is there a realization or awareness that when the government does that, borrows from the commercial bank, whether a single source or a competitive source, that it is putting a strain on the private sector, which is also wanting to
True.
borrow from the same.
Agree. I mean, usually you don't expect the government to compete with private sector for the same pool of resources.
Yes.
And when the government borrows locally, that may tend to bring much less resources to private sector. Or for the private sector,
Yes.
it might be more expensive.
Yes.
And it's not encouraged for government to borrow locally like that. So my position would be to advise the government, maybe, if possible, to go for concessionary borrowing outside.
Like the World Bank,
World Bank,
IMF.
IMF, those have special tools for us, and to leave local borrowing to private sector.
And if you borrow much of the concessionary in the World Bank, IMF, aren't you putting a bigger burden to this country? Because that's more or less like loans, isn't it?
It is essentially loans, but
For
the
the
problem,
future
the
generation.
beauty of those loans, they tend to be having longer repayment period, maybe
Yes.
50, 60 years.
Yes.
So the pain is going to be reduced. For example, if you're building long-term investments,
Yes.
like standard gauge railway,
Yes.
it is advisable that you use long-term debt
Okay.
to finance long-term assets.
Yes.
Technically, that is what you call matching.
Yes.
You match long-term investments with
Repayment
long-term
period.
debt.
Oh.
So that kind of facility, you borrow long-term.
Yes.
And because it's going to repay itself over long term, as we
Yes.
generate more volume,
Yes.
we are able to repay. I would advise the government. to
Oh,
operate.
that's very interesting.
Okay.
I read some aspects of your report, and I found it also very interesting. You were saying the government should collect more taxes, either to avoid or to cut down borrowing. And I wanted to know, is it your professional view that if the government collected more tax revenues, it will borrow less?
Definitely, that is the rule. If you are able to collect more taxes,
Yes.
then the resource envelope is going to be full because of taxes, because there is no room for borrowing.
Yes.
You can only borrow if you are building long-term assets, and therefore, if you are building long-term assets, it is not advisable to pay cash.
Okay.
It is not best practice. You better put the cash in a bank and get the bank to lend you money
Yeah.
to do that,
Okay.
and then use the long-term assets as collateral, and then over time, that the asset generates
Yes.
volume or profits, you repay the loan.
Okay.
But cash should not be used to finance long-term assets, which is something we have noticed currently that some people in government are doing, which is not very advisable. We should always advise, and this is not my position only. This is a position that should be given by the Minister of Finance. It's the position that should be given by the Bank of Tanzania, because they are the ones who actually advise the government on these matters of borrowing. So the position is always match.
Again, as a follow-up to that response, Professor Assad, every year you read, you hear in discussions with academics like you, economists, that this country has not expanded the tax base. It's only probably the fifth phase administration that we were able to collect substantial tax revenues. But why is it an unsatisfactory situation? We don't collect enough taxes, or is it because we don't have the data of who has to pay tax in this country and who doesn't? And at the same time, there are complaints that the people who pay tax in this country are public servants, because it's a direct deduction from their source.
I think the biggest argument we can make is the argument of should we enlarge the tax base or increase the tax rate. I think over a number of years, more concentration has been made on the tax rate. But the theoretical argument is if you enlarge your tax base,
Yes.
with a lower tax rate,
Yes.
you might be able to generate higher tax revenues.
Okay.
Now, the theory is if you charge zero tax rate, definitely you're going to get zero tax revenues. If you charge 100% tax rate, you're also going to get zero tax revenue because nobody is going to have the incentive to do anything
Yes.
because you're going to collect all of it.
Yes.
So if you look at the curve, it is going to start at zero and then goes up,
Yes.
and then at some point it's going to tip and then come down to 100, zero again. So that high point is the optimum level.
Yes.
And we need the ministry to work out, and the TRA, what is the optimum tax level that Tanzanians may tolerate. That is an academic exercise, but maybe not very high, but maybe if it becomes lower, everybody will pay taxes,
Yes.
and then we may get more revenues.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm giving you a theoretical response,
Yes. But fundamental.
but fundamental that we don't need to increase
yes.
the tax
Every year
rate.
increasing the
No.
tax rates and
All-
taxing the same.
or multiplicity of taxes,
Yes.
several taxes for the same person.
Yes.
That is works the same way as increasing the tax rate.
Yes.
So reduce the taxes rate or the number of taxes, enhance the tax base.
Yes.
We may get more revenues.
Yes.
That
Now,
is the way. to
Okay.
go.
Is the problem compounded by tax collection, by collecting that very tax? Are we efficient enough in collecting that tax?
No, I don't think we're efficient. Certainly, there are areas where you can see inefficiencies.
Yes.
Only yesterday, I was checking on the internet, the
Yes.
person I wanted to get in touch with, and I was just searching the name, and the only information that I saw
Yes.
was tax information. The name was there, the TIN number was there, and I checked with the TRA. Can you tell me who this person
Yes.
is?
Yes.
Can I get the coordinates? And they told me, no, this is very old. We don't have the tax coordinates.
Oh my God.
So our databases are not up to date.
It's a cake.
So that is problem number one. We haven't updated all our tax database.
Yes.
And that is about increasing the tax base. If you update the databases, the tax base is going to be increasing.
So what would you be advised to TRI on
My,
that particular aspect?
my advice is more groundwork, definitely. You need feet on the ground.
Yes.
People to walk the streets and identify areas where there are people who are not properly registered, and then they get registered on the spot. Not necessarily to pay taxes, but just registration.
Yes.
So we're registering you, we'll come back to you if you don't pay taxes in a year's time.
Yes.
And then people see that as something positive.
Absolutely. Maybe to just cite an example here. In the United States, I'm sure you're aware of that, Professor, not paying your tax is a serious crime. Do we make that as a serious crime?
No, but because here people get away with murder. You can afford not to pay taxes. I know a case.
Yes.
It is not public, but I know a case of somebody who had understated the sale of a property, and authorities know that, and nothing has happened. But I'll give you an example. Many years ago, when I was doing my professional exams, we had estate duty. If you died, your distribution will tax some of that. So before your beneficiaries can have anything.
Yes.
And that was a source of revenues.
Yes.
And at some point, I think that tax has died. Why has it died? Maybe it's too complex to implement. But my theory is perhaps the people who should be paying the estate duties, they're the people who are actually making the decisions now.
And
you know, if you are having an estate, you must be having money.
yes.
If you're having money, you must be somebody in government
Yes.
or a successful business person. Usually these two are combined now. people in government, they also run successful businesses.
Yes.
So they're not interested in estate duty, so estate duty is dead. So
That's very
that
interesting.
works to reduce the tax base.
Yes,
So
yes. That's very interesting.
I think we need to work around that. as well.
All right. Okay. I'm sorry to go back to the national date.
No problem.
If the national date continues to increase and we do not control and curb this, whether excessive, whatever level of increase, will that have an impact on the national, on government resources for development? Because you know this one was a major highlight in the report.
Definitely. I think the national debt is an obligation to pay in the future sums of money for something we receive now. So if we don't receive anything now, we are incurring obligations that are empty. And that is a worry always. So if we're incurring debt, there has to be something physical that we're getting. And the worry is, if you're incurring debt to meet some recurrent expenditure, it doesn't make sense. But if you're incurring debt to expand ports,
Yes.
and then we can allow better trade,
Yes.
then that makes sense.
Okay.
So my position is debt can be very, very useful, but
Well,
it has to be managed properly.
Okay. Apart from the, I decided to pick just about 8 areas for which you have raised concern in your report. For example, of course we have discussed now, misappropriation in the National Identity Authority, tax relief, investment by social security funds, political parties not accounting for the money they get, and then there's borrowing from the bank as an issue, and phantom workers. Do you think these are just about enough, or there are a few other areas which you
I think my answer to that question is the report is a very rich report.
Yes.
And what I presented last week are very high-level summaries
This is the one we present to the president.
to the president
Yes.
and the parliament as well.
Okay, the same.
Very high-level summaries. What we need to do is to get people interested in reading the report thoroughly. When you read the report thoroughly, there are quite a number of other issues as well. I'll give you some examples. I think in the report we talked about joint ventures.
Okay.
Joint ventures is where the government enters into partnership with private sector to run a business.
Yes.
But they don't do a good job of running businesses. And that is for us a quite major finding. That you become, say, a majority partner, and the private sector is a minority partner, and you leave management to the minority sector.
That's the private sector.
Private sector. And it doesn't happen anywhere where minority is given management by the majority shareholder. So technically what they're going to do, they're going to strip assets.
Absolutely.
They run you empty.
Yes.
And we have done that many years, and we continue to do that today.
Oh dear.
And you say, wow, what is this? Why do you get into business with the private sector if you're not prepared to run a business?
That is public and private sector
Yes.
participation.
It's PPP. But strict PPP is where you have a government asset,
Yes.
private,
Right.
and then
Complement,
they
yes.
do some business, like you see in the toilets in Dar es Salaam city.
Yes.
The city owns the land, private sector comes in, they build toilets, they install water, and they charge money, and they do business. That is pure PPP.
Yes.
But if the government goes and invests in a gold mine, it is private-public partnership, but it's not pure PPP. The definition is slightly different.
Oh dear.
But that is one area we noticed, JVs. Another area we also raise in the report is weaknesses in oil and gas.
Okay.
And the weaknesses in oil and gas largely mirror our experiences in gold mining as well.
Okay. Yes.
And what we notice is we never prepared ourselves to enter into gold mining. We didn't have competencies and skills to do that and to supervise, to provide oversight.
Yes.
As a result, we negotiated from position of ignorance.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Which in my view is disastrous. If you negotiate from a position of ignorance, you can't negotiate. We did that. The problem is we're moving into oil and gas along similar lines, which is going to be dangerous as well. So we recommend that we develop competencies and skills in-house among our people so that we can say we have such and such a people who are experts in oil and gas and they can provide oversight. As of now, we don't have those experts.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
So we're saying we need to do that. That is the second point.
Yes.
I think also in the report we are giving findings of a special report we did on the measles and rubella vaccination. Funds we got from Gavi in the US to help us. And what we report is those funds have not been used properly. There are quite a number of fictitious payments, which is something that should not be tolerated. And the recommendation we make is we should take action against all individuals that would prove to be colluding in making those fictitious payments possible.
Okay. Oh dear, we have 10 minutes. Your predecessor, CAG reports, consecutively found a series of issues of resources by local government authorities. Did you also find this situation the same in 2015, 2016, or there have been some improvement here?
I think there are issues in local government authorities, but largely they're quite significant improvements. They're improvements because of two matters.
Yes.
One, the quality and competence of staff, accounting staff has increased. We have much better staff and they're much more competent. So as a result, the work is much better. But I also think the control environment has also improved. The councillors now are much more watchful. We have internal auditors in the council that are working very well, and they're much independent. So these two reasons, I think, in my view, have resulted in improvements in reports in the local government authorities. There are a few issues still, but I think generally we see some improvements.
Okay. The last but one, I suppose, as we go on. I've read, I've heard your complaints that budgetary allocation for your office, National Audit Office, is usually inadequate. And there was a heated debate in the Assembly about, desire to increase your budget. Now, if this is not done, what will be the implication in terms of your national auditing functions and exercises?
I think my response is going to be, one, I want to make a correction.
Okay.
I don't think we have ever complained. What we have done last year was we engaged with all stakeholders. We engaged with the Parliament.
Okay.
We engaged with the Ministry. We have also engaged with other stakeholders about the resources that were provided, and that the resources will not allow us to meet our constitutional mandate to audit all central government votes, all local authority votes, and all projects. and that is defined in the Constitution. We wouldn't be able to do that with the resource we were given last year. And I think at some point we decided, no, those are resources, proceed and do it. And
so you did with what you had.
And now we have a year, and all of us have learned. It has been a very good experience for the National Audit Office because we were innovative and very creative in use of resources, and we were able to do what we are required to do with a very limited resource base, with some pains definitely, but we were able to do that. But I think also the government noticed that the money was not enough because technically we were given more money than was budgeted for. I think as of last month, I think the month of February, we had received 115%.
Okay.
And that is basic recognition by the government that the money was not enough.
Okay.
And even the parliament also had experience.
Yes.
That there are things we should be doing together
Yes.
in terms of capacity building, and we told them, no, we can't do that. We can't capacitate you because we don't have funds. And they saw the pain of a reduced resource base for the National Audit Office. So that is what I call now history. We have learned from that experience, and my view is this year, definitely things are going to be improving.
Okay.
And hopefully it's going to be much, much better.
By the way, Professor Saad, is there a working function or relationship between your office and the Controller General in the Ministry of Finance, the Treasury?
Internal Auditor General.
Yes, Internal Auditor General.
Yes, there is. As you are aware, or you may not be aware, in what we call the pre-engagement phase of auditing,
Yes.
what we need to do is study the control environment of the client. Has anything changed in the year? Is there anything that we need to pay attention to? One of the things we must pay close attention to is the work of the internal auditor. So by definition, my work revolves around the work of the Internal Auditor General. He's the one who controls all these Internal Auditor Generals across all, and they report to him. So if I need any reports, I'll go to him and he gives me the report.
Okay.
If there are issues we need to discuss, and we have a very close work. Very close relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those institutions, public institutions that end up getting, I don't know whether the word is bad, report, but I think there's a word you use.
Yes.
Have you ever recommended that necessary action should be taken, for example, to reduce their budgetary requests or allocation so that they know it is serious to balance their books?
No, we have never done that. We have never done that. But I'm aware of a World Bank grant
Yes.
that is given to local authorities,
Yes.
and one of the scores, the
Yes.
attributes, is the quality of financial reports.
Okay.
So if local authorities score very low points, they get less resources.
All right.
If they score high marks, they get more resources.
Okay.
So payback is going to be through those kind of programs.
Okay.
But we cannot recommend that an institution
Okay.
gets
Okay.
less resources because they have.
Okay, I can see these fellows are warning me time is up, but there was the last question which I think is important.
No problem.
Professor, you have done a great service to this program today by explaining all these issues relating to national auditing. So let's see if we can wind it up now by saying, what, if any, are the challenges that you face in your national auditing work, and what will be your final advice to the public sector in terms of management of public resources, financial resources as well as the other resources?
Challenges in the National Audit Office, as I said earlier, I mean, the biggest challenge we have is professionalization.
Yes.
We need to professionalize the work of each and every one of my staff.
Yes.
But at this point, I must say I'm very, very grateful for a lot of hard work
Yes.
that has been done by a lot of my people, what I call the foot soldiers.
Yes.
They've done excellent work this past year, and I'm very grateful for them. But that advice will go to across the whole public sector.
Okay.
In the private sector, people get rewarded because they've shown initiative.
Yes.
People are rewarded because they've gone the extra mile.
Yes.
You don't see that in public service. In the public service, people do just the bare minimum to get the salary.
Absolutely.
But if you want to change public service, you want to encourage people to do more. And the only thing the only way we can do that is to make sure that we can reward initiative and reward people who can go the extra mile. If we do those two properly, then I think the public services in this country is going to be a very, very good future. That is my last word.
Yes. Professor Assad, thank you very much for your very excellent response to some of the questions that I put across to you. But basically, it's important because you have explained the genesis of the CAG's reports to Parliament and your findings and what it is important, why it is important for the public sector to take heed of your findings and, you know, take action to improve the situation. Thank you very much. Viewers, you heard the views of my panelists today, Professor Musa Assad. I mean, the findings and recommendations of the Controller and the Auditor General, Professor Musa Assad, who is my guest today, as contained in his report for 2015-2016, are fundamental and reveal shortcomings in many of the public sector finance, expenditures, control, and management. He has highlighted the need for government to borrow less, increase tax revenue collection, reduce the national debt. Has also revealed irregularities in public procurement, called for a review of the current fiscal regime in the mining sector, as you heard from him, as well as in the oil and gas management. Let us hope that his findings, his recommendations will be taken heed, will be taken seriously by the government in order to improve government performance in terms of management of the resources that are made available through the National Assembly. And this is not just for the government, but for all institutions that the National Audit Office does auditing, so that, you know, action to remedy what has been found by his report and warnings is taken very seriously. That's all we have for you today. Until next Sunday at the same time, and on Thursday for the repeat program at 15 hours. On behalf of Professor Assad and my TBC crew, thank you, viewers, and goodbye.